Hey there, we're Chris and Melissa Smith of FamilyBrand.com, husband and wife, parents of 5, and we want to help you unleash the power of your family.
And we know it can be so challenging raising a family, where the return on investment is unmeasured and sometimes it feels like your efforts are completely unnoticed. It takes real courage and commitment and a long-term vision for what you are building. You're building a family.
And as entrepreneurs, we always think it's so interesting how your brand at home is the one that you think about the least. But at the end of your life, it will be the brand that matters the most. And look, none of us want to wake up one day feeling like, man, we missed it. Like we missed this opportunity to create something really amazing as a family.
So what you can expect from us are actionable tips and strategies that you can implement in your daily life to become a better parent, a better spouse, and to build a stronger family. The world needs strong families now more than ever, and it starts right here with your family. Kim Shapira, and well, first of all, welcome, Kim. Thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
If you were going to have a conversation with Kim, well, let me tell you a little bit about Kim first. She is a Los Angeles-based celebrity dietitian, nutritional therapist, and an author of a book that is called "This Is What You're Really Hungry For." Yeah, we'll get into more about Kim, as this episode progresses. But Kim and I, we met through a mutual friend on Instagram, and we were messaging back and forth. And I was like, this would be a great conversation to bring to our audience on the Family Brand podcast, all about nutrition, but just not nutrition, but how your relationship with food and how that impacts not only you, but your family and the kids that you're raising.
Yeah, I mean, we could get into nutrition. My degree is in human metabolism and clinical nutrition, but as soon as I say that, I think people shut down. And most people already really know what they need to do. I mean, some are neglecting to do it, but most people know, and there's lots of reasons why that feels hard or people shut down. So I'm excited to have this conversation with you around our relationship with food.
Just an aside, my sister-in-law is a dietitian, and so I know the education required to have that degree and that title, if you will. I don't know if you're the same, but for her, it like a little bit drives her crazy how there's so many people who talk about nutrition and food. She's like, but I had to go to like so much school to become a dietitian.
Yeah, like there's a difference between a nutritionist and a dietitian. And I think it's really interesting. I didn't know that about your sister. I now want to know your sister. Yeah, we have the exact same education, I'm pretty sure. And it is super frustrating because there's so much involved. It's not just a one size fits all either.
Yeah, I just applaud you and the work required to get where you are. And I know we can learn so much from you today. So maybe we just tell us a little bit about yourself. I know you're a mother and you have, this Kim Shapira method. Can you tell us?
Yeah. So I'm 51 and I have 3 daughters, 20, 17, and 15. And I'm married and I have three dogs. So very full house. My oldest is a junior in college and my middle is a senior in high school and my youngest is a freshman. So really full house, so to speak. Just always changing. And I guess that's good. Always something to work on. I was inspired to become a dietitian because I would have thought of myself as a sick kid. I spent my 12th year in and out of the hospital. It was 1986 and I had multiple reconstructive surgeries and I used to go to UCLA every Wednesday. So I spent about 5 years going to UCLA every Wednesday to see my specialists. And one day I must have been crying in the car. I was 12 and I was a shy, sick kid. And my mom said to me, "Don't cry. We'll go shopping after your doctor appointment." And it just totally created this like pleasure in my mind that I could do something fun. It was like a reward that was already happening. And it actually happened every Wednesday for the next 5 years. And so it really cemented this shopping addiction. People would say I was addicted to shopping and I was like, no way. I just like new things. But somewhere in high school, some doctor, a friend of mine, mentor, he said to me, food makes people sick or it makes them unhealthy. I mean, it makes them healthy or it makes them sick. And it was like that moment where I was like, wait, I could be healthy and food can make me healthy. Then I'm going to choose that route. And I thought everybody wanted to feel healthy, And so I went to grad school. I did all the hard classes. And then I opened a private practice. And one of my very first clients was a therapist. And she I put her on a diet, told her exactly what to eat. And she was like an A+ student. And she lost 30 pounds. She got off some of her medications. And I was like so pleased with myself because I had helped her get healthy. And then she said to me, I'm going to gain the weight back. And I said, why would you do that? And, traditionally what, people cycle, the yo-yo diet, they can do something really well for a short time and then they lose track of it. They don't even know where their mind went during that period and they just can't get back to it. And so here I was with this woman kind of like completely emotionally triggered. Like, why would you do this? We just totally made you healthy. She said, my husband wants to be intimate with me all the time. And I was molested as a child. And it was like kind of that moment where I realized I don't know anything about the people living inside of their bodies. And then as I started really recognizing the way that my clients were eating, I started seeing that I'm shopping the exact same way. And so as I started healing myself, I started applying that to my clients. Like, why don't you put that on hold and walk away and see what happens in 15 minutes? Why don't you only eat or buy what you love and see what happens to the stuff that you're just kind of like wasting your time on? And as I was healing myself, the method started really working for my clients in what I would call long-term success, because that's to me the only important goal. And we were kind of, you know, changing behaviors, which was ultimately leading to long-term results. Yeah, that's my story.
I love that. And that is a lot to unpack in a lot of different directions that we could take that from here. Where should we start? Like, where should we start with this conversation if we're talking about how to have a healthy relationship with food?
Yeah, it's a very good question. Well, if you can like kind of follow my thread, you saw that my mom gave my mind something really rewarding. And we have to recognize that our mind is the most important piece of everything. And so we're not sitting here telling our heart to beat or our lungs to breathe or our stomach to digest. And we're also not telling our mind to think. It produces 60,000 thoughts a day in response to what you see, smell, feel, hear, and touch. So it's already doing that for you, right? Except the difference is we didn't know that it was doing that. And we didn't think of our body as self-healing and self-generating and self-regulating. And so we're taking credit for all of these thoughts. And then we're filling ourselves with shame and persecution. So if we know where our mind is, if we start with just understanding why my mind is responding that way, then we can really be more accepting and move forward and make some changes.
And what would that look like? Like, if you could give an example.
Our rational mind knows that food is fuel, right? Everybody knows food is fuel. We have 100 trillion cells. Our body needs to be fed. We know that we get sensations all day long that tell us that we have to pee or that we have to go to sleep or that we need to eat, right? These are physical sensations. That's the way our body communicates to us. So we know that we need fuel from the outside world to breathe and function. And so when we become irrational, when we become emotionally triggered, and each human has between 3 and 5 emotional triggers that they develop in the first 6 years of their life. And anytime they go through something traumatic, they develop a new trigger. And our job is really to master these triggers as we go through life, right? And so if we are emotionally triggered, and this is what you're talking about, what does that look like? It could be a deadline. It could be a scary person walking next to you. It could be that you're in physical pain. It could be that you're hungry. It could be that you're stressed. It could be that you're bored. It could be that you're worried about what you're going to serve for your family dinner next week. It could be that one of your children doesn't like to eat certain foods, right? Any one of these is going to cause your mind to kind of flip its lid. And if you have a history of eating because of any discomfort, your mind says, oh, we should have, something to eat here. And if we can start getting in the habit of recognizing that every single time we have a thought that food is a good idea, it's an alarm. And if you and I were having this conversation right now on a podcast and your alarm was going off wherever you were, you would probably put me on hold. You would go to the alarm center, you would turn it off, you would scan your environment. And once you felt like you were safe, you would come back and resume our conversation. So if every single thought about food is an alarm, then we need to be able to go to our alarm center, turn it off. And that's just knowing that your mind is left, been triggered. You got to bring it back. And then once you bring it back, you're able to scan your environment, which is your body. And here you might recognize that your stomach is growling or your chest is tight or that you're in physical pain somewhere else, or that you're bored. And so let's just imagine, Melissa, like you have a child come into the room and they're like, Mommy, I am so stressed. And you're like, honey, let's go eat. That's what I do. You would never do that. But so many of us have parented ourselves that way, just like I did with shopping, right? Because I needed a place for my mind to go that was more pleasant than where I am. And so being able to stay in the moment, even if it's uncomfortable, is the objective. But also we've survived all the moments, so it's not so bad. We can do it.
So I'm trying to like put myself in this because I couldn't, if someone were to be like, what are your triggers? I wouldn't be able to say, well, like right off the top of my head, well, these are them. But
Yeah.
as you were describing them, I'm like, oh, I do have this time in the afternoons when it's probably more boredom. And
Yeah.
and I usually like find myself over in the pantry, but I'm like, okay, so what you're saying, if I'm going to like walk through this process is the next time I get that trigger in the afternoon,
Mhm.
it would look more like, okay, wait, what am I actually feeling right now? Is it hunger or is it boredom or is it stress or is it, scanning all the different things it could be? And that would be the best.
It doesn't even matter what caused the trigger. Like one of my triggers is fairness. So like anytime there's like a dinner party, I'm always worried about the people who can't hear or the people who aren't sitting close enough to the middle of the action. Well, that's ridiculous. Like, why am I so worried about everyone at the table? Right? Everyone can fight for themselves. So I get emotionally triggered. I'm a middle child. We have 18 potential triggers. But what happens is you don't really have to know why you're triggered. You just have to recognize that you're having a visceral response in the moment. And you can either, pay attention to what it is and then really work on, basically saying, I'm bored. This is going to pass. Because I don't really want you to find a distraction. I just want you to be like, it's okay to be bored. It's okay to be stressed. It's okay to be tired. But so many people, when they are feeling these ways, think that caffeine is going to help or food is going to help. And the truth is like, we're emotional people. We're going to have lots and lots of emotions. And our job is to recognize that we're stressed and then to become resilient, right? So it doesn't matter why.
So if you are parenting children right now and those children you said you developed these triggers, before what was the age again?
6.
6.
By the time you're 6, yeah.
By the time you're 6. Okay. What is there like around parenting? Is there a certain thing you should be doing, shouldn't be doing?
Yeah.
What does that look like?
I don't know how you are, but for me, I always heard all my friends say, I want to be better than my parents. I want to do it differently. And like, each one of us has our own limitations and our parents certainly had limitations, right? And their parents had limitations. So nobody goes into being a parent and saying, I want to complicate my child's life. I'm going to give them 3 or 6, 3 to 5 triggers in the first 6 years of life. We don't want that. But just based on our personalities, it happens anyway. So I'll give you an example. I have 3 kids. My youngest was always kind of like took longer than her sisters. And I would always like hurry her up. I love her. Like I want to eat her face. Like she's pure cuteness. And I can't help that she's so, she takes her time and all the things. And so in my stress of being late, or my husband, likes to be 15 minutes early anywhere, we contribute to kind of like increasing or intensifying, like, let's go, we gotta go. That then creates an emotional trigger for her if she's running late or feeling stressed or being called on. And like, we didn't do it on purpose, but that's what happens, right? And so now my only thing is to change the way I'm responding, right? But so it's her also job to recognize the way she's responding, right? It's her journey. We've contributed to that journey. And now she's got to really like learn how to deep breathe when someone's hurrying her up. And that could happen when, the teacher calls on her in class. That can happen when she's not prepared. And it can happen a lot until she recognizes it. Does that make sense?
Yes. It's so interesting, the journey of parenting, how you're saying it is what it is, I think, in some cases. And it's like, we aren't going to parent perfectly. And even if you did, like these things, we're still raising like little humans who are going to have, their things and their own journeys that they're working through.
Yeah. I mean, I don't label food as good, bad, healthy, or unhealthy, but the rest of the world does. And in my house, we have every kind of food, whether it's, ice cream, cookies, bananas, carrots, we have everything and we just call it food. And in some ways, I remember when my 20-year-old got to college, we didn't talk about calories. We didn't talk about weight. We ate when we were hungry. We ate whenever we were hungry and we didn't, eat more than we needed, but food was always available. And in some ways, I really didn't prepare her because when she got to college and she lived on a floor with 30 other girls and she saw that people had unhealthy relationships with food, it was the first time. And, then she was really confused on why do people fear fat? Why are people, contributing one way? Why don't they listen to their bodies? So we don't try to mess up at all. Yeah.
Yeah. It's so true. And then you never know, even
You
if
never
you
know.
raise two children the same,
Yeah,
like you're saying, your younger daughter, it affects her differently, like being hurried, whereas your middle child, maybe not.
definitely not. Yeah. Yeah. And, to be fair, I remember coming out of the hospital once and my best friend's mother said to me, "Oh my gosh, Kim, you've gained weight." And I remember thinking, that means I'm healthy, but it could have really landed wrong on the wrong person, right? Because perspective is very, very interesting and no two people have the same perspective.
But I'm reminded of just your comment there of I've seen many times people posting about how you should never, you'll have to tell me if you agree or not, about commenting on your child's weight or on their appearance and how that isn't the best approach as a parent, which I do agree with. But I'm like, as a parent, if you are looking at your child and you feel like, they could be healthier or I'm concerned for maybe it is their health, a health concern. How would you approach in a healthy way?
Yeah. First of all, I do believe that everyone has their own journey and somebody has to be ready when they're ready. And I would be like, I had dinner the other night with a friend and we were at a Chinese restaurant. There was 15 of us and I was ordering for the table. And the person next to me said, I'm going to order my own food. I'm like, okay. And she said, because I want to eat healthy. And when she said that, it made me feel like what I was eating and putting in my body was unhealthy. And I really had to say to her, like, I don't really think you should be saying you're going to choose healthier food because I feel like what I did choose could also work. And like it's like making me feel so bad. I mean, if somebody were just to say like, oh, you look like you gained weight or you look like, your weight is changing, how would you interpret that? Especially if you're not even really understanding why that comment is coming and children are growing,
Mhm.
right? And then if you start talking about food and you're like junk food, when you label any type of food, you're going to eat that junk food. And then the kid eats the food and they're like, oh my God, I must be horrible. I ate junk. What I remember with my 20-year-old, we went to the mall and throughout like many times when we went to the mall, she would ask for a soft pretzel. And I would say, sure. And then she would say to me, I have a stomach ache. And I said to her, I wonder if it's the pretzel. Maybe next time try eating half and see if you still get a stomach ache. And she did. And she said, you know what? I'm not going to eat the pretzel anymore. That's how it should be done, right? Where we are actually empowering our children to understand their own bodies because we're not in them. We don't know how they feel. And food, like I have one client who has a eating disorder. She's anorexic, but her mom is as well. And it's very confusing whose disorder this child has, right? And so this child grew up knowing in quotes that, certain foods were going to hurt her stomach. That's not true. We're not the same. We don't have the same stomach, right? It's very confusing. And we really have to listen to what our child is telling us and be curious and not project, how we feel or think about food because we don't know. We're not in their bodies.
I love how you just described the experience with your daughter too, letting them, as my kids are getting older, my oldest is 17. It's been this journey of like releasing control or
Yes.
my perceived control. Um, and I could see that in food as parents, we might be doing that too, like wanting to control, how much or what they're eating, which is easy when they're little. And it's like you control exactly what comes into the house and what leaves. But as they get older, it really I love the example, like that you're allowing her to experience for herself, like eating that pretzel, even though maybe you're not choosing it for your snack that day, but allowing her to have that experience with her
Yeah.
body and coming to her own conclusions and not you having to control.
Yeah. I mean, I grew up having, Twinkies and ding dongs and kudos bars and whatever. And I never was the person who needed to have any of that because I always had it in my house, but I always saw people come into my house and eat like two or three of them at a time because they didn't have it in their home. And, we have lots of different things in my house, and my kid will sometimes say we have no food, because it's not exactly what they want, but they have it all around just so they can feel like it's not important.
I feel like my kids say that to me too.
It's hard parenting.
I'm like, we do have snacks in here, but maybe it's just like you're saying, not what you want.
Yeah, exactly. I know it gets confusing. Yeah, I just think we need to allow our kids to tell us how they feel because ultimately they're going to grow up and, know exactly what they like and don't like. And we don't want to give them any emotional triggers around food.
What, as I mentioned at the beginning, you are an author of a book. It's called This Is What We're Really Hungry For. And in that book, you break down 6 simple rules. And I imagine that we've talked around some of them. Is the podcast a place where you could tell us about your 6?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. So the first rule is to eat when you're hungry, to take your normal portion, cut it in half, and wait 15 minutes to see if you need more food. So this is based on, the physiological response to when we need food. And typically we should have food every 3 to 4 hours, trusting that we're going to be able to get food. And we make all decisions from a place of trust or fear. And there's a lot of fear around food and even hunger. Hunger is isolated to your stomach, not painful. It's not scary. And, this is pretty extreme, but we have never died of starvation. So the fear that we won't have food is very irrational, especially, as moms, we were all packing snacks and food for our children. So we do tend to be more fearful that we don't have enough when we really do have enough. So that's rule number 1. And that's based on the ghrelin, leptin, hunger, fullness regulation in your stomach. That is very, very popular right now with the GLPs and Ozempic. Rule number 2 is to eat what you love, but to make sure the food loves you back. So this really clears any disordered eating habits or mindsets and really allows you to focus on how do you feel? And are you suffering from, headaches, burping, clearing your throat, heartburn, nausea, stomach noises, gas, diarrhea, constipation, psoriasis, eczema, all the things, right? And so once you can kind of recognize, I didn't realize that those foods were making me sick, then you can kind of also recognize, 1, I have to heal my body. And 2, why would I stay in a relationship where I'm being abused, right? So we get to do all sorts of work in that rule. Rule number 3 is to eat without distraction. And that now we're covering emotions, we're covering just food being in front of you and cravings. And ideally, I only want somebody to eat when they're hungry.
With this, to eat without distraction, this rule for a family, could this look like when you are eating, like it's easy to just like sit down at the table, turn on the TV, put the tablet down at dinner. Would you say that would be part of this rule?
Yes. So, we have a lot of GI issues. And one of the reasons is because we're eating quickly and we're eating while we're distracted. So to be honest, we're meant to smell our food. We're meant to actually have our mouth watering before our first bite. And in that watering situation are a bunch of enzymes and things we need to break down the food we're eating. We're also meant to swallow liquid by the time it's being ready to go down into our stomach. So we're supposed to chew our food. We're supposed to smell our food and chew our food longer than we think necessary. And it takes about 15 minutes once it hits our mouth to reach our stomach. And so just by slowing down and being with your food, which people say they love food, they don't like to be alone with it because it's really, really boring. So they're looking for, any external stimuli to help them have a more pleasurable moment. And that really disrupts our GI. So we can't tell, like if we can eat without distractions, then what happens is we start smelling our food, chewing our food, and we actually recognize, wait, I don't need as much food as I thought. Yeah, because they're ready to go on with their day or their activity. Very important rule.
Yeah. And again, I could, with families, I'm like, oh, I could see that. Cause even my kids, I feel like, I just think in today's day and age, you can not be bored like all the time. It's like everything you could ever want is just like one click away. And it's like, oh, I'm kind of bored eating this food. Like, what else do I have out there to distract me? Or what app can I turn on? Or
Right.
what can I turn on?
Right. And like I would just play around with like, do you love what you're eating? Do you really like, and then we don't like, we're rewarded by the anticipation that I get to put it in my mouth, which is really, really funny. Like, oh my God, I'm so excited. I get to put that in my mouth rather than I really like how this tastes. I wonder even where this came from. And then, going through the process of being with your food. It sounds silly, but it's a really important thing to do to help your digestion and your relationship with food. Rule number 4 is to get 10,000 steps. We need to be active. And this is really good when you start with half and then, clear out and go have a dance party or go for a walk with your family. What ends up happening is you get more steps and then you recognize you didn't eat as much food as you thought. And rule number 5 is 8 cups of water. And rule number 6 is to get 7 hours of sleep. These numbers are different for kids because they're not as big as us. But these are, kind of the adult rules, I would say. Yeah. And the average American right now is getting about 6.5 hours of sleep. And it's, people are having problems falling asleep, staying asleep, and waking up feeling rested. And all of these contribute to increasing cortisol levels and fat storage, really. So we really need to get a hold of our stress and our sleep.
Yeah, I've seen just recently, I was seeing news studies that said even if you're just increasing your sleep by, I think it was 45 minutes, just the increase, I think it was as related to teenagers, but just the increased performance that you'll have.
Yeah. So melatonin, which is really an interesting conversation for families, is a hormone that we make naturally, and it gets released when it's dark out, and it helps make us feel sleepy. And so many pediatricians always tell a parent, when you notice that your child is getting tired, don't miss that window, right? And as adults, we ignore when we're sleepy, and so that actually tells our brain to wake up. And so then we have problems falling asleep or staying asleep. And when we don't have melatonin being released naturally and making us sleepy, we have problems with inflammation. So melatonin is a hormone and an antioxidant that goes in while we're sleeping and kind of vacuums up all the toxins we don't need in our cells. So if we're missing out on sleep, we're missing out on this cleaning process and we're waking up full of inflammation. And when we have inflammation, we're less motivated to do any of the things we need to do.
And I know I'm thinking to all those moms listening who are like, I wish I could get more sleep.
Yeah.
I'm up
Yeah.
to this behavior with the toddlers. Would you have, it's just like a hard phase of life sometimes. Would you have any suggestions for
Yeah.
who's feeling that?
Yeah. I would get into a good sleep routine like early on, read some great books on sleep from, different doctors have produced some really excellent books. But one thing that I really love telling moms and dads is that create a book with family pictures with your child and write the story of their sleep because children have so much separation anxiety and fear while they sleep, and sleep is a habit. So write this story from your child's perspective, have them write it with you. And then every night before they go to bed, read it to them. So, tonight, Melissa went to bed, she put on her pajamas, she brushed her teeth, she washed her face, whatever it is she's doing. Then she followed her nighttime routine where she maybe took some deep breaths, sat in a rocking chair with her mom or however it's going to go. And you use real pictures of, Melissa and her mom and whoever it is. And then you just tell the story of what happens in the house. At night, the house sleeps quietly, it's protected, everybody's body is working on healing and having positive dreams, however you want the story to go, and really get in detail of how that looks for your child while they're sleeping. Mommy is sleeping in bed. Here is where mommy sleeps, or, here is where daddy sleeps. It doesn't matter. Write the story so your child knows exactly what's happening over and over. And then baby wakes up and baby comes in at 7 a.m. and tells mommy it's time to get up, however you want this to go. Yeah, it's very helpful for everybody Because remember, our mind needs to know we're safe. And a toddler's mind or a baby doesn't really feel safe when they're separated. And so we need to give them the story so they know that they're safe.
No, that's a great solution to that. Even my 9-year-old earlier this year, I think I don't even know what had triggered it, but he had a few weeks where he was scared at bedtime. So I could even see me using this. I didn't have access to this idea, but now that I do, I'm like, oh, if that comes up again, I'm going to try that.
Yeah. I mean, it's also really good if, you guys are going away for a couple days and they're staying behind and you just write the story of what that looks like and what they're going to be doing and what you're going to be doing.
One, thought that I have in my mind, I'm like, oh, you're raising 3 daughters. What I think it's such an interesting world we live in as it relates to women and how they perceive like their bodies and their health and how they're perceived in media. What are you telling your daughter and or are you telling or for a mom listening, what would you be saying to your daughters that might be different than what you might say to us on?
Nothing. I would say exactly the same. Like, we've had a few conversation. Like, I think I wouldn't say anything different, but I would say my 17-year-old said to me, I must have had a reaction to the word fat. And she said, Mom, fat's not a bad word. And so we've had these conversations, where food is fuel and you're also going to be emotional and food is not entertainment. It's also not comfort. And I think we just have this relationship with food where we seek it out when we're hungry and we're not, having it when we're not okay. I would have the exact same conversation with my kids. And very early on, my father-in-law, who was like a new addition to my family, when I knew I was pregnant, I said to him, we're never going to really use the word fat or calories or talk about women's bodies in this house. And he was like kind of outraged at this idea in the beginning. Like why? That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Come on, that's crazy. And I'm like, that's just how it's going to be if you want to come over. And in the 20 years that Olivia's been around, or almost 21, she's only brought it up one time. And I remember saying to him, no, still not okay to have this conversation. Like there's zero need to have this conversation about anyone else's body, in my opinion.
We are just handed like so many ideas about how we should look or you're like, what is quote unquote desirable. And I think that sometimes that can be just a really hard thing to navigate for parents and for women as you're raising women and just not getting caught up in all of that and just being okay with who you are. And
well, our kids are spending 60 hours a week with their peers and their peers have parents or people that they're living with who again are talking about things that these kids are then bringing into your children's lives. And I think when your child feels very confident in who they are and, we're going to give our kids triggers, like that's going to happen. My parents loved me and they did it to me, and they have them from their own. So I think the more confident we can have our child be and really find their strengths, we need to be able to recognize, when we're impacting negatively our child and course correct and apologize for that behavior. I would say, the biggest problem that I had with my children was what we were going to eat for dinner, because not all of us liked the same food. And certainly one of my children didn't like a lot of the other things that we all liked. And so without labeling picky or anything, the solution we came to was everyone gets a night. And whatever you're having, whatever you're picking for the menu for that night is what the rest of the family is having. And so if we would take out a calendar and there were 30 days in the calendar, Olivia got Monday, Sophia got Tuesday, Natasha got Wednesday, I got Thursday, Matt got Friday or Saturday. And whatever, if I put, chicken, let's say for dinner, and maybe I said barbecue chicken, maybe I said, who knows what I said. There was always going to be a fruit and usually a plate full of fruit. There was also going to be a plate full of vegetables. And sometimes there would be a cooked vegetable and a raw vegetable. So if somebody wasn't eating the chicken, then they could have the potato or the rice and the fruits and the vegetables. And nobody said anything. Nobody said you didn't eat protein. Nobody said you only eat fruit. We just ate when we were hungry. And I trusted that it was only one single meal and that they were going to have 3 to 4 or 5 the next day. And it was fine, right? There was always something. So there was really no need to kind of harp on what ingredient or nutrient you did or didn't have.
Yeah, that's great. And something else you said is about labeling a child as like picky or not.
I don't think there's room to change in a child's life if they start with a label. And so I'll give you an example. During the pandemic, one of my children said to me, I think I'm going to be a vegetarian. Now, as a dietitian, every single red flag went off in my head. Like, oh no, this is a sign that there's an eating disorder, disordered eating. And, TikTok is all over the place. And what the heck is happening? So I took a deep breath. And I said to her, you don't have to label yourself a vegetarian. You could just choose to have a vegetarian meal and no one has to know the difference. And she liked this and she accepted it. And it's never been an issue since. And sometimes she has steak and sometimes she doesn't have steak. And we don't talk about it, but really giving her permission that she doesn't have to label it. On the other side of that is, she was recently talking to somebody who was saying, I'm going to be a vegan because I want to restrict myself from all of the ingredients that I'm overeating. And any time that we restrict, we're going to binge because, our human body's survival is at risk. And though we're going to go into like full temper tantrum and our mind is going to say, we need to eat, we need to eat. And so that's not inner power. That's not confidence. That's relying on willpower, which we run out of. So I really don't believe in having labels around food.
That's helpful. We're almost at time today, and I would love to hear from you. If if a family is listening to this and they're like, okay, where's one place where I can start? Like if I know I want to make some changes here, where can I start? What would be your advice to a family?
Yeah, I mean, they could help themselves. They could figure out, what's going on with why they're becoming reactive or fearful. They could work on meditation and ways to become more resilient by taking deep breaths and relaxing their nervous system. It's kind of like Esther Perel, who's a relationship expert. She says that we can have up to 8 relationships in a lifetime. And sometimes we have 8 with the same person. And, I see what you're doing on Instagram and I see how, you and your husband are, constantly in a new relationship and also accepting that this is how it's going to go. And I do believe that we can have 8 with ourselves as well. And so trusting that you're in a new relationship with yourself and that you're going to allow yourself to be more curious of why you're responding in that way. And instead of being fearful, starting to learn how to be trusting would be a place to start.
That's beautiful. And I think that is a lifetime journey, is like trusting yourself and that you can know what's best for you and know the next steps.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if your child says to you, am I fat? You would never want to answer that question. You would want to say, do you think you are? Why are you asking that? What's going on with you? Right? You want to open the door. And if you tell them, no, you're not fat, and they think they're fat, now they're not going to trust you because you lied to them. And so we don't really want to concur with anything they're saying. We want to just kind of help them expand their minds to let's see what we can do to make you feel better.
Yeah, that's great. And being a mirror almost in a way for not giving them any answers. I think that's powerful leadership. Also, as a parent, is like not giving them the answers, but having them do the work themselves.
Their life, actually.
Where I know we just this is the tip of the iceberg for everything that we could learn from you. But if someone, I'll link your book in the show notes. If someone wants to, have a further conversation or see more of your work, where can they find you?
On all the socials at kimshapiramethod.com or just like all the socials at Kim Shapira Method. If I do have groups where I call it the besties group. And so if you are struggling and you have a couple friends that you always talk to about, this would be a great way to kind of get the conversation going with just your specific concerns. It's with you take 3 or 4 of your best friends and you meet with me for 1 month and we just kind of uncover all of this fear and really help put you on a more positive path. And my book is basically available anywhere the books are being sold.
Awesome. That besties, that sounds like a very unique but fun way to approach this, with not alone, but it's in a good supportive with your girlfriends, with your besties. That sounds.
Yeah, you're already having it. So let's get some expert opinions in there.
We'll link to that in the show notes. So thank you so much, Kim, for your time today and for sharing with us everything about, nutrition and families and kids and how we can have these healthy relationships with food.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to the Family Brand Podcast. To say thank you, we have something really awesome we'd love to share with you.
You know, we often hear from families who will tell us that they just feel so overwhelmed because of the demands that are placed on them. They feel like they're constantly being pulled in so many different directions and spread thin, and they're spending time as a family, but they don't feel like it's quality time. They're not really connected, and they want to be more intentional. And we can certainly relate because we felt like that at one point in our family. And so we created a guide that allowed us to really be more confident around how we spend time as a family and what we say yes to and what we say no to. And it's just brought so much more peace into our home. It's made our lives so much more simple. And we want to share it with you. So if you go to familybrand.com/free, you can download the How to Take Back Your Family's Time guide. And I can promise you it'll give you more confidence and more peace in your life and in your family.
One last thing, we feel so inspired when we hear from families that we are making a difference for them. We would love it if you would leave us a 5-star rating and a review on the podcast so we can reach even more amazing families. We truly believe that the way we change the world is one family at a time.